Welcome to Inside Out, the Emotional Awareness Podcast, a Mentalus Academy production. Let's learn more about ourselves, inside and out.
Well, hello again, and welcome to our podcast entitled Inside Out, the Emotional Awareness and Wellness Podcast, where we talk about all things related to wellness and mental health and all kinds of topics in between. Today, we're very happy to have with us Mario Daher. Mario, thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And maybe we'll just spend a few minutes having you tell us a little bit about yourself, the topic you chose to talk about with us today, and maybe a little bit about why you chose to talk about that.
Of course. Hello, Daniela. Hello, Nadine. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'll introduce myself very briefly. First of all, I'm a father for two beautiful daughters, 15 and 9. I've been married for 17 years. I'm also an entrepreneur. I launched a business in technology/wellness a couple of years ago, so much of my questions will revolve around that area. I left my home country a few years ago and came to live in Canada, so I also have a few questions in the topic that I chose related to immigrants. And just to dive directly deep into this, my topic for today is the comfort zones. And I'll just start with the first question. For you, what is a comfort zone? What is the definition of a comfort zone? And how can I differentiate it from normal resting or taking a break?
Interesting. Very interesting how you brought it up to start with. Comfort zone can be a resting place. It is when we find that we've been turning around and we are not satisfied anymore in that resting comfort zone, that we feel the need to do something, that we start questioning where I am. It can be, I don't know what do you exactly mean by resting place or comfort zone, but we human beings always look for the easiest way around. So whenever you are in a comfortable place, we don't want to change it. We are okay, we found our references, we found our habits, we are fine with that. What makes us want to change that is a different story. I don't know what you think, Daniela.
Yeah, and I would add to what you just said, Nadzin, that to me, it really, and I say this a lot, I find it's always a question of why. So, for example, if you're in a comfort zone at this moment in your life, why are you in that comfort zone? So if you're in that comfort zone because you've worked hard, this is a time of your life where you just want to take a break from things and it's a choice, that's one thing. If you're in a comfort zone because you're trying to avoid something, because being out of that comfort zone produces too much anxiety for you to go there, that's a different story. So I think comfort zone per se can have several definitions. It's more to me a question of why are you in a comfort zone, if that makes sense.
Yes. I might narrow down my question because in business, in personal development arena, when we talk about comfort zones, we talk about it as something to avoid at all costs. That was my question. What is the definition of the state where I'm at that is blocking my growth or blocking my advancement in life?
All right. When I hear that, I hear avoidance. So in that sense, I'm hearing less about it. I'm in a comfort zone because I want to be there. And I'm hearing more that it's an avoidance to whatever next step has to be taken. I don't know if you agree with that, Nedzin.
I agree. I would also add the way you brought it. I find it amazing because sometimes people in personal development also use slogans in a way that makes us feel uncomfortable just by saying it. If you are okay, if you don't need to step out of your comfort zone, as Daniela said, then it's not a bad thing. It's a bad thing when you want to move to somewhere towards something bigger and or different, and you find that you're avoiding, you've been procrastinating, I will do this tomorrow, you're not doing the efforts. This is, I think, where they are talking about comfort zone and you need to step out of it.
How do I know if I'm stuck in the comfort zone?
Do you feel stuck?
I'm not talking about a specific area in my life, or let's say in a business context. How can someone, or even parenting, for example, how can someone know if they are stuck and they need to get out of this comforting state?
So that's a bit like, and Nadine, you touched on it earlier, and you said that as human beings, like we like to be in comfort. That's exactly what we are programmed to do. We're programmed to have enough to eat. We're programmed to have a safe place to sleep. We're programmed to, all animals are really. So there's nothing wrong with the idea of being in that state. However, when do you know that you're in your comfort zone when you should be out of your comfort zone is when something's not working. So in your example, even if you said like parenting or business wise or something like that, if there is something there that is not working for you, if there's a pain point, but you choose to stay where you are because it feels too difficult or too anxiety producing to do anything differently, that's when you know you're stuck.
Okay. I think here I asked you the first question related to entrepreneurship or business. Let's say for an entrepreneur, usually from your experience, what is the common areas where people, entrepreneurs are mostly scared and usually result in, let's say, hiding in a comfort zone? Is it public exposure? Is it fear of failure? Is it, I don't know, a public launch or sales, dealing with customers?
I think it's very different depending on the personality of the entrepreneur. I don't know what you think, Daniela, about that. I think it's very different.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is very personally dependent because people become entrepreneurs for different reasons, right? Like they can become entrepreneurs out of an internal drive to achieve something or to create something. It can be a very creative process. Some people become entrepreneurs because they feel some sort of family pressure to do so. Maybe they come from a long line of entrepreneurs. Some people, it's purely out of necessity, like it's, I need to do this because nothing else is happening, so I'm doing this. So that means that their motivations are different. If their motivations are different, then the fears that they might have of getting out of their comfort zone will be different according to what that motivation was in the first place. So I'll give you an example. So it could be a fear of failure. That's always a big one for sure. This is working right now. For me to scale up or to do something more or different, I might fail and I don't want to fail and I don't want to look bad or whatever. Or it could be a fear of failure, but in a different form, which is I don't want to lose everything that I've built. I don't want to risk any of that. So it's a risk aversion. It could be, again, in my example of family dynamics, it could be all my siblings have all been successful. So if I try this or if I go outside my comfort zone, then I won't be able to compete. I won't be able to be the same as my family would want me to be. So there's all kinds of reasons there, and it really is very individually dependent. But at the bottom of it, definitely is this idea of fear, either fear of embarrassment, fear of humiliation, fear of loss, fear of all of that.
I think you touched on a good point, Daniela, that I was thinking about is the combination of risk and fear. And this is why it's very personal and for each person, because our perception of what is dangerous or what is threatening for me may be very different from what is threatening for Daniela and may be very different from what is threatening to you. It's very different for everybody going out of this fear area or what is threatening and how much they are willing to risk and their capacity to cope with the risk. I find this is why it varies from one person to another because all of those elements varies for depending on who they are, where they are going, everything.
Great, thank you. So let's say I, as an entrepreneur, let's say I pinpointed an area in my business where comfort zone is holding me back. Do you have scientific recipes or advice or daily actions I can take to get out, to push me out of this comfort zone?
I would say the first step is understanding what's behind that for yourself or for anybody, not just for you, is to be able to sit down and what I like to do often is just go through the series of questions like, and then what? Okay, so my comfort zone, I'll just use any example. I want to start this business, but I have a full-time job. And if I start this business, it means quitting my full-time job, for example, and starting this new business. That takes me out of my comfort zone because now all of a sudden I don't have a steady salary anymore. Okay, so then the question is, okay, so if I do that, and then what's the worst thing that could happen? I quit my job, I start this new business, and it doesn't succeed. Okay, and then what would happen then? Then I'd be forced to admit defeat. I'd feel terrible. My ego would take a hit. My self-confidence would take a hit. And then worst case scenario, I guess I'd have to go back and look for another job again with my tail between my legs. Okay. And what would happen then? Then I'd be back to the point I started from. Okay. How is that any different than where you are today? It isn't. Oh, so now all of a sudden things don't look so scary anymore. Now all of a sudden the person comes to the realization that, okay, all these things, all these scenarios in my head, even the worst case scenario isn't that bad. So that's one way to get unstuck from this comfort zone, is to realize that maybe it isn't so comfortable after all, or maybe what you're dreading is not so uncomfortable after all. So it's trying to bring that a little bit closer together.
If we go back to what we were discussing before, in that same example, here comes the risk factor, let's say. What if the question is Daniela asking, but maybe it doesn't have to be I quit my job. Maybe it would be, what if I quit my job and by the time things go, I don't have enough money for my family. I don't have, you see, and this is how it varies from one to another. Do I have enough money? Am I willing to risk not having enough money? Am I willing to go through? I'm speaking about money because usually when you have a family, it's something you're concerned about. Do I have enough to provide? Do I have enough to take care of them? So the risk factors and the fear may be starting to not just from one idea to another, they might be scattered into different things. And then the same thing applies here. What is it that I'm willing to do here? I would add also to that, when we start going into this process of thinking, what is it that I'm afraid of? Daniela took it from the other way. What if? What's the end result of it? For me, it goes to what is it that I'm afraid of? Then we can see, so what can I do about that? Or what is the worst thing, as Daniela said, that could happen?
Very good. I think I have a more precise question. Okay, in my business, there is something we call an MVP, a minimum viable product. So imagine an entrepreneur working or planning on a certain product or service. An MVP would be the simplest form of this product that I can ship to customers just to test the market. Now, in this period when I'm planning, usually I have to find the sweet spot between not planning too much and delay my launch because the business will die, and not be hasty and launch something unplanned or not well planned, and the product will fail in the market. At this phase, how do I know if I'm hiding behind my planning? If my planning, because mentally on paper, every point I'm working on in my plan makes sense, but it can go years without shipping the first version of the product. So when should I know that I'm simply hiding behind my plans? What is the rule of thumb?
I don't know that there is a rule of thumb, but I think what you're describing is what I've often heard called paralysis by analysis, which means that you just keep refining and perfecting something and saying, it's not quite there yet and it needs a little more work here. And I think all entrepreneurs can relate to that because there is this push and pull between wanting to launch something, to get something out there, while at the same time wanting it to be the best it can be. And those two forces are pulling in opposite direction all the time. I think what you can do is start to recognize when that's starting to go the way of perfectionism. And perfectionism is actually another form of procrastination because it's a way to it's like an insurance policy against failure. If you never actually launch, you will never fail. So you always keep this hope there. As long as you haven't launched, you haven't failed yet. So there is an element of that. And it's easy to hide behind that because it's not obvious. From the outside, it just looks like you're trying to make the absolute best product you can. But I think it requires a little bit of soul searching. And you said, Mario, you think you were at that stage at some point, but you got over it. And I'm guessing the way you got over it is you had to sit down with yourself and say, okay, why am I continuing to do this versus just taking the plunge and launching? And I think that's what needs to happen at a certain point. I think someone else talked about it too as the law of 80-20, which is you spend 80% of your time on that last 20% of the work. And is it really worth it because you're holding yourself back? So I think it does require quite a bit of soul searching that way for entrepreneurs. And that's where having somebody, whether it's a business coach or a mentor or something, somebody to talk to really helps, because that person can say, listen, I think you've gone through this enough at this point. It's time to fly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Actually, so far, I still have one question related to comfort zones in the business sense. So far, we've been talking about either being inside the comfort zone or outside. Our comfort zones, how shall I say this? Do they expand? Do they change? Or it's either in or out, either black or white? Is there an amount of comfort zone that is safe for my growth?
I think as human beings, we adjust. So we step out of our comfort zone. We take some time to adjust. We cannot just zoom out of comfort zone. It's very disturbing for us. And we start acting randomly and acting out. I think that we expand our comfort zone slowly. So the more we push, the more we go out, the more our system gets to be acquainted with different sensations. Oh, yeah, this was stressful. I managed to go through. And then we get to this place. Oh, yeah, I managed to go through, so I can rest a little bit. So we go into a micro comfort zone that kind of gives us another push to go out again of comfort zone. So it goes in this way.
And I think there's something to be said too that our comfort zones can change and modify themselves based on the people and the safety that we have with the people around us. For example, if our partner or our friends group or the people that we trust, our families, have different comfort zones, maybe their comfort zones are larger, then by interacting with them, we co-regulate. So our comfort zone gets larger, maybe for someone who's really very much a risk taker, being with someone who's less so will regulate them down a bit. Either way, it's very helpful to have that support and safety network around us.
Excellent. All right. I have another set of questions related to comfort zones and relationships. I almost always think about this as a father. As a father, I always think about what's the best advice for my 15-year-old daughter, because she is at the first years of her dating life, and I want her to have the best possible outcome from that young experience. And I also know that being stuck in a comfort zone would almost always lead to unwanted results. So for a young age, at what young age are comfort zones hard? Would it be at 15, at the beginning of her dating life, or at the later stages in her life?
That's an interesting question because it really does depend on a lot of factors. So you talk about relationships, especially with children or teenagers, their first relationships are really with their parents. That's what sort of sets the foundation of what their future relationships will be like. And it also sets the foundation for what is their comfort zone. Like, do they feel very self-assured, and do they feel very confident? And therefore, in relationships, are they able to set proper boundaries, for example, and say, this is acceptable, this is not acceptable? Or the other side of that equation would be like a teenager who doesn't feel very self-assured and therefore feels that they need to be very accepting of whatever the other person tells them. So you see, it's not so much their comfort zone, it's more how they relate to other people and how far they're willing to bend those boundaries of their comfort zone.
I would add to that in the same respect. A kid goes by his comfort zone, specific in that area, by seeing how much their parents are comfortable with this as well. So they either would comply or rebel, depending on their history, depending on the go. But it's not just set in stone. It's a relationship, as you said. It's a thought pattern. It's educational. So I think there is nothing set. It's how they see, how they assess the risk they are taking within their eyes and within the eyes of the people surrounding them as well.
I'm curious, Mario, when you talk about comfort zone from a dating perspective, is that what you mean? Like their level of wanting to accept risk when they date?
That's exactly what I meant.
Okay.
Did we answer you somehow?
50%. This is why I thought about another question. How do I, as a father, also, how do I differentiate between the healthy protection of my daughter when do I become overprotective of her?
You see, here again, we go to this sense of safety that we have within ourselves, within the capacity of our child, that we think they can take care of themselves, that they can, that we trust. There is trust, there is risk, there's this idea of safety. And then there is, as you said, the fear and of overprotection. It's a very hard combination, I find. I think there is a big learning curve there. I think communication can be very helpful in a way, Daniela.
Yeah, I would add to that in terms of communication, non-judgment. You can have very clear idea of something that your child is doing that may feel to you like it's risky, that you really want to protect them against something, and that's fine. And you can communicate that as long as you don't do it in a judgmental way. Because if you can be non-judgmental about it, that's the way you keep the lines of communication open, is to say, this is what you're thinking of doing. I'm not telling you that you're a terrible person for doing it. That would be the judgment part. But the non-judgment part would be to say, listen, I'm your father, I'm your mother. I'm here to help you and to protect you. And I will always tell you if there's something that I think that you're doing that's putting you at risk. Now, that being said, I'm not making any judgment on your capacity, on who you are as a person. I'm just telling you from my perspective and from my experience that this is risky.
And I think also there is a big part of for parents to go out of their comfort zone with this for their kids, because by them wanting to protect their kids, they might be overprotective, they might be controlling sometimes, and it's not coming from a bad place, it's coming from this place. Or as you ask, where do I stop, and how do I know when it's too much, and how do I know when to give them enough space to fly from their own and yet be protective? And I think communication from that perspective, not being judgmental. And I think sometimes when we, again, raising kids, they can come back to us when we give them this space of safety. This is, I'm concerned about this, I trust you enough to let you go do whatever. No, I'm here, you can come back to me. When they know that whatever they do, they can come back to this safe space, I think it can be very helpful for them. But it's very hard for the parents to learn to let that.
I get you. So let's say my daughter is of the reserved type, and I'm always pushing her to get out of her comfort zone, to try new ventures, to push her limits forward. When do I know that I'm being too pushy, and when should I either protect her or leave her alone, or when should I let her struggle a little bit?
Actually, that's a good example because you can actually ask and you can say, I'm doing these things because I see that you're the type of person that's reserved and that's reluctant to get out of your comfort zone, but please let me know if it's too much. And that opens a whole line of communication because now it's about you and her and it's not about her and the outside world.
And I think it opens a different line of communication between your perception of what is good for her and her perception of what is good for her. And having this kind of communication can be, this kind of true communication can be very helpful.
Very interesting point. Yeah.
It's very
Gotcha.
difficult to do when they're teenagers and they begin their teenage years, because until a couple of years ago, they're your baby. They're the ones that rely on you to tell them everything. And now all of a sudden they start to develop some independence. And now you have to look at them differently and you have to shift your way of dealing with them. And they're not quite adults yet, but they're not children anymore. So it's a very tough time to be able to have that.
I get you. For parents, is there some rituals or some tools we can use to subtly push them out of this comfort zone without being too pushy? Let's say I am definitely sure that my daughter has been quote unquote resting inside the comfort zone and not fulfilling her potential. If I'm not gonna be judgmental and I'm not gonna push her to get out and do whatever she needs, in my opinion, she needs to be doing, are there like healthy rituals, habits we can do in the family that encourage her to engage in discomfort, uncomfortable situations more?
I think it's a question of understanding what she needs to get out of that comfort zone, and everybody's needs are different. For some people, it's like they really need to be outside of their element and just completely in a new environment, and then they have no choice and they have to do something different. For other people, it's really incremental. And what may seem like a small little step for you may actually be huge for her. I don't know, let's say she's very socially phobic, for example, and doesn't like to go out and talk to people or things like that. For you to say to her, oh, come on, just go to the party, you'll have fun, it's fine. That's a huge leap. For her, just maybe going to, I don't know, going for a walk with you is already a big step. Just getting out of the house and going for a walk. For you, that might seem like nothing. So it's really to go along with whatever her pace might be, even if to you it doesn't look like much.
We go back again to this idea of safety, to regulating, to what is important for me. So, as Daniela said, it's important to ask her. And maybe from what you're saying, you will ask her, she would say she doesn't know how to go about it. But it's very important to give her space to self-regulate as well, so she can push her comfort zone. It's not just about this part of her life, it's about giving her tools so she can use it later on in the future. So in the same sense of what Daniela is saying, what's a big regulation part for me, myself per se, might be huge for somebody else or might be insignificant for someone else. So I think it's very important to give her those information that she has a safe space to come back to. She can leave as far as she wants, when she wants, and how does she want to get help to do that.
I get it. So you mean slow exposure to new things, but at her own pace?
Yeah, I think that's important for her to feel. You want it to be a good experience. Once she stretches out of her comfort zone, you want it to be positive. And then she builds on that. If that's positive, then the next experience will build on that. If it's negative, she might take steps back.
It's the same
Excellent.
process of going out of comfort zone. You need to stretch a little bit, regulate, be familiar with it, build the strength inside, and then, oh yeah, I did that. I can do more. Maybe I can do more. I feel comfortable enough to push a little bit more. The push is very different for everyone.
Got it. I still have a question about marriage. Generally speaking, how can two people know if a certain habit or a pattern is something healthy or it's a dangerous comfort zone that might damage the relationship on long term?
Nedzen, you look like you're about to say something.
Because again, we go back to this idea of there is no set of rules. Some people are very comfortable with their routines, and they live all their life with it. Some, for other people, other couples, routines might be killing the couple. And I think it's very important to be aware, communication as well, to be aware of where we are. Is this routine giving me any joy, giving me any connection? Am I feeling that I'm nurturing my couple with this routine, or I'm feeling I'm killing my couple in this good routine? For me, this is goes back to the same idea of risk. Am I willing to change this, and will it take me to somewhere else, or I'm okay with this, I'm satisfied with it?
Yeah, and the thing with relationships, again, is that it's a two-way street. So what may be comfortable for one may not be comfortable for the other. So one may be in a comfort zone, but the other one's just going along with it, but not necessarily happy about it. So that's where the communication comes in, and there needs to be enough trust and safety. There's the word safety again, there to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to have this difficult conversation, and I'm going to be able to tell my partner, this is not working for me, or it's not enough for me. I need more, or I need something different, which is, again, it's getting out of your comfort zone. It is a scary thing to have that conversation. We don't necessarily want to start a conflict or risk the relationship. But I think often what people don't understand is that it's a much bigger risk to the relationship not to bring that up than it is to bring that up.
And I would add to that, because we are creatures of habits. So habits gets to build up. And as Daniela said, my habit would be good for my partner, his habit may not be good for me. When we say trust, is trust enough that I can say this without it bringing conflict? And even sometimes, if it brings conflict, sometimes conflict can shake things up. I'm not saying to go to pick a fight. This is not what I'm saying. But I'm saying when we start moving, things start moving. And sometimes they don't move the way we want. Sometimes they move in a rocky way. But I think when there is trust enough that I'm doing this for us, this is what I want, this is what you want, how can you work it? I think it can be a good way.
And you bring up a good point, Nedzin, and that's to make the differentiation between conflict and destruction.
True.
Conflict does not mean destruction, but often that's the fear, is that conflict will lead to the destruction of the trust of the couple. If you feel safe enough, then conflict does not equal destruction.
Great. Excellent.
Hey everyone, we hope you are enjoying this podcast. Want to find out more about this topic and much more? Check out our courses at Mentalist Academy. Find out more at www.mentalistacademy.com. And now, back to our podcast.
Let's move a little bit to some questions related to immigration and immigrants. An immigrant would generally leave their past life far behind. They get rooted and they decide to go live in a new place, in a new culture. For them, for these immigrants, where is the line between keeping the old ways and stepping out of the comfort zone to adapt to the new environment? Should they hold on more to their old ways for a certain period of time? Or should they challenge themselves immediately to get out of the comfort zone and start exploring this new culture and integrate to it?
I find that for all immigrants, just doing this step is a huge leap out of comfort zone. Just to start with that. How do they adjust? I think what you're asking is how do they adjust when they leave this and they land? And I also find it's very different. There is no rule for that. Some people, it goes back to how we manage risk and how we find our references to find safety. For some people, safety is I need to check around everything around me and see that, make sure I know everything. This is how I feel safe. For others, it's I need to feel safe where I am, and then I can push myself a little bit out of my comfort zone. So I think what's important is to be mindful of the signs of how is it that I do things. There is no rule for that. it really goes back to how each person, each unit, because sometimes it's people, sometimes it's a family, sometimes, and that is a big stress. So families sometimes go under a lot of stress when they immigrate because of that, because they don't manage stress in the same way, or they don't manage going out of comfort zone in the same way. So that kind of puts them in conflictual situations, and they need to be aware of that.
There is also the idea that the perception of the change is different depending on what culture you come from, what the difference is between the culture you came from versus the one you're going into. And that makes a big difference into how willing you are to take the risk. And it's definitely a very difficult process. There's a lot of grief and loss that people don't really talk about in terms of leaving the past behind. Sometimes you don't want to leave the past behind. You didn't exactly ask for this. You come to someplace new because out of some form of necessity or other. And so there's that. There's the grief and the loss of what you leave behind. There's the risk and the fear of acceptance and adaptability to the life you're going into. And sometimes it's even just a basic mismatch. Like it's not what you would want it to be. I think what it requires is a sort of openness to say, I'm going to retain those parts of myself that are tied back to my culture and my past that are important to me. But at the same time, I can remain open to something new and absorb that as well, so that the total becomes bigger than the sum of the parts. But that comes with time, and that's not something that happens right away.
Interesting. Daniela, let me ask something about that. Is there, for one person, is there a comfort battery for all the aspects of their life? Or, okay, let's rephrase that. Let's say I just immigrated, and to me, I feel like I used my entire battery for change, but then it would start affecting my personal relationships, my business, my willing to learn in new culture, those parts you talked about. Should an immigrant that's already exhausted from the immigration process itself, should they push themselves to get out of the comfort zones in those parts of their life, or should they take it easy on themselves? Because I see this in many immigrants that I know, that once they are here, the first couple of years, they get stuck in one way or another in their relationships or in their business or even their career. So I'm trying to do the link between that and the fact that my battery has been drained out.
And I think you said it well. It depends on which battery you have, right? Some people's capacities are different than others, depending on a whole bunch of different things, their upbringing, their experiences in life, the level of trauma that they have in coming here. That makes a big difference. And I think the best thing that anybody can do is just to be kind and compassionate towards themselves and understand that this is how they are right now. It doesn't mean that this is how they're going to be forever. There is something to be said about being able to push yourself at times, but not to the degree that then you're being self critical and hurtful to yourself, because that doesn't help.
What you said about the grief and the loss, and it goes back also to how we cope with grief and loss, and do we want to stay connected to that loss, or are we willing to let go of parts of it to be able to be open to other things? I think it's a very hard process to go through.
It's like when you're grieving the loss of someone, there's no hard and fast rule. There's nothing that says, oh, after 3 months, you should be over the death of a parent or something like that, and you should move on. No, for some people, it lasts 3 months. For other people, it lasts 10 years. There's no hard and fast rule. So it's the same here. It's giving yourself the grace to say, this is what I'm experiencing right now, and it's okay, and helping yourself to work through it. Because the more you try and push it away or say, I shouldn't be feeling this way, I'm wrong to feel this way, it'll just come back in different forms. It's not just going to go away because you will it to go away.
Yeah, and same thing. It goes back to how safe we feel to be able to push through. How safe do we feel to be able to unpack our luggage and Look around. You see, I find it's a safety thing. It's a deeply inner safety thing. Even if we want to, if we don't feel safe enough to do that, we're going to stick to our old routines because this is how safe I feel for now. It's not a matter of want.
I get it. So far, I've been asking questions about comfort zones for people, for individuals. Can this concept be applied to a group of people? Can a group of people experience a numbing comfort zone, or this is something individualistic on?
I think there is a certain group experience. If everybody has had a similar experience and they come here, let's say from another country, let's give an example, as a result of war, things like that, there will be a common experience that they can all relate to that gives it a certain color, if you will. But at the same time, within those groups, the individual reactions can be very different. So I'm thinking about somebody who comes here thinking, you know what, like I'm done. I don't want to ever have to deal with that again. This is a new start. This is a new country, and comes in very bullish and says, I'm just going to go ahead and just push ahead, and doesn't matter what happens. I've got nothing to lose anyway. That's one way of looking at it. And then somebody else with a very similar experience might come in saying, you know what, I've come here reluctantly. I didn't really want this. I'd never asked for this in my life. And they keep always having a foot back in the past, never quite making that commitment. That person's going to have a much tougher time and a much smaller comfort zone. And yet it's the same experience in the same group.
And that's what you came back to individuals. I wanted to see more if a comfort zone can be treated as good or bad at a higher level, let's say an entire people or a nation or a large group of persons.
Well, and I guess that's what I meant when I said that the trauma can be a group trauma where everybody has experienced something similar, but what to do or how they react to it going forward, that can vary greatly by individual. That's why groups that tend to come from certain areas tend to also regroup together in their new country, because there is that shared experience. And it's more of an experience of trauma, I would say, than
It's
necessarily.
more trauma bonding than experiencing.
Exactly. So the comfort zone is individual, but the trauma is collective.
Okay, so probably my last question, but when is it wrong to advise someone to leave their comfort zone?
I think by and large, people don't like to be told what to do. And
To
people
start with.
don't react well to being told what to do. So I think if there's someone you care about that you feel is stuck in a comfort zone and not progressing, the best thing you can do, rather than give them advice to get out of their comfort zone, is to help them see that they're in a comfort zone. And then what they decide to do with that's up to them. And when I say stuck in a comfort zone, there's nothing wrong with being comfortable, but if they're really stuck, if they're in a place that they really aren't progressing, they aren't doing what they could be doing. And again, that's from an observer, that's your opinion, but that doesn't mean they feel that way. That's the first thing you have to understand is, do they feel like they're stuck, not just in a comfort zone, but stuck in a comfort zone? And if the answer is yes, then the best thing you can do is just try to get them to see that, okay, you're here, you're telling me you're not happy where you are, but it's comfortable. So you get them to see that's actually all you can do.
Yeah. Let's say I'm asking this in a chit chat with myself in the context of, I don't know, certain trauma or burnout or exhaustion. Should I avoid fighting this comfort zone at those phases in my life, or getting out of the comfort zone is always a good thing?
Again, it depends where you're at that moment. If at that moment, this being in this comfort zone is harming you, it is causing you pain, it is causing you an issue in your life, then saying to yourself, okay, I'm stuck. I feel stuck. Then it's a question, okay, then what do I do about that?
And you see, sometimes we can see that we are stuck. but we don't have it in us to step out of it. And I think it's very important to acknowledge that. You've mentioned big words, burnout, trauma. It's not easy for someone who's experiencing this. And even if you're not experiencing that, you don't need to go there to say, I'm stuck. Well, I'm snapping out of it. That is not easy at all. It is a very hard process to, now we're talking about it as if it's something easy. It is not easy to access our risk factors, go out of comfort zone, go out what's threatening for us, being afraid of losing everything we have, being afraid of losing the love of the people we have, being afraid because I want to go forward. Going forward takes a lot of energy of us. And we need to have this energy with everything else we do. It's not a thought we need to have. I think we need, as Daniela said, we need to be very compassionate with ourselves. This is where I'm going. And sometimes I'm going 2 steps, sometimes I'm pausing, sometimes I'm going 4 steps, sometimes I'm going back 5 steps, but this is where I'm going. And I think it's very important to be gentle with ourselves. It's not, I must do this. Yeah, I should be working more, but if I can't see anymore and if I can't listen to anymore, I'm getting snap at everyone just to go there. I think there's something to be considered as well.
Yeah, and if we're talking about trauma and burnout, you can see how by pushing yourself, you may actually be re-traumatizing yourself or causing further burnout.
This is my last question. What is the definition of the opposite of a comfort zone?
I would say challenging enough zone.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, actually.
You're just stimulated enough, motivated enough, you have the energy, you're not putting so much pressure, you're not holding back. I like the word enough. It's like, it's challenging enough for me. So I feel safe, I feel comfortable, I'm having good experience, I'm able to process even loss, even failure, even if it's not working. I have the capacity, the mental and the emotional capacity to, that didn't work. Why not? This is for me. I don't know for you, Daniel.
Actually, the image that came to mind for me, Mario, when you asked that question is like an athlete, for example. An athlete can do a certain amount or can perform to a certain level, and putting them in a discomfort zone, which would be the opposite word from comfort, would be almost causing them to risk injury, because now you're pushing them way further than they can possibly go. So what I like about your definition, Nadine, of challenging enough is to get that athlete to just go a little bit over what they can do, to say, okay, you see, you can do this now a little. It's a little more challenging. It's challenging enough, but not enough that they're going to get hurt. And I think that's probably a good way to look at it from a psychological perspective too.
I think she coined the new interesting word. You should trademark the challenging enough zone.
Mario, I really want to thank you for being so open with your questions. And I think this is something that touches a lot of people in one way or another. So I think it'll be very helpful for people to be able to hear about this and hopefully make them reflect on how things are running in their life as well. As we found with a lot of these podcasts, what starts in one direction ends up touching on a lot of different things, but many very useful things. So thank you again for doing this and for being so open.
I have to thank you also, because I feel that I am going more enlightened in those different areas of my life, business, family, relations, and the whole immigration thing. So I really thank you for your help in this. Very fun.
Our pleasure.
Pleasure to have you, Mario.
Thank you.
See you next time. Find out more at www.mentalizeacademy.com